there's so many memories of Pierre Boulez. Right now, as we speak, I can definitely say that I miss his smile. He had this like most sophisticated, gentle smile and a tremendous sense for irony and wit. And I miss that a lot. I think our friendship is going almost 25 years back now. And in these extremely challenging times now, with the virus, putting basically everything that we stand for, that we dream of, on pause, on halt, is that desire for movement, which means you have to move. And even if you don't know exactly in what direction you move, the goal is to move. Standstill is death and boredom and average. So this is really what Pierre stands for. I'm talking in the present because he's so with us. His spirit is very present in not only my life on a daily basis, but in so many people's lives. If you saw him even in his old age, like walking very fast, he was walking faster than all of us together. And it's just, a translation of his mindset. I mean, he was moving and always moving forward. And these times where we're now forced to become creative in a completely different way has a lot to do with what Pierre did in his entire life. He was a creator. He was an enabler. He was the one to always raise his hand when his voice was needed to initiate all these great institutions that he left for us. I mean, he built all these houses for us, for you, for me to live in and fill them with creativity. So this is Pierre, and there's many stories, of course, and it would just completely be beyond the format that we have here. But I live his responsibility also on a daily basis. As an interpreter, as you mentioned, Philip, as a conductor, I really understood, not only learned, but understood through him and from him that we have to every day try to be the best possible advocate of what is in the score, to make that the reference and really try to push away of what we like and how we like it because we like something or like something less. The only reason for making something happen is the book, the text, what is in the score. So this is really what is inside me that has become part of my personal DNA and the DNA of many others and wonderful colleagues. It's interesting. I can't really answer that question. I'm realizing that I played so much of Pierre Boulez's music in my life, and he conducted many of my works over all these last 20 years. And in all these countless meetings that we had, or let's call it time that we spent together, mostly in Baden-Baden, more in Baden-Baden than in Paris, we were always, sitting next to each other on his couch and with the scores on our laps and discussing Schoenberg and Debussy and Webern and Bartók and mostly really French repertoire, a lot of Schoenberg, but we never discussed our own scores. When he performed my music, I came and he rehearsed it and he played it. And likewise, when I performed his music. So it's interesting that we kind of left that out. And because there was so much trust and respect, and naturally he would just rehearse everything that was needed. So it didn't need me to walk up to him and say, can we have a look at bar 65? I think the trombones should articulate a little softer. he was going for it anyway, you know, and that's, you know, it always puts a huge smile on a composer's face when you realize that the advocate that is advocating you in front of an orchestra is going for exactly the necessary spots and adjusting, trusting his ear and trusting what you see in the score. And that was definitely Pierre. But I so cherish his curiosity, not only the generosity to always be available when we had questions, the younger generation, but his curiosity. He was not teaching me, he was asking me questions like, what do you see in this bar? Or why do you think we always do it that way and not that way? So it really was a very open-minded dialogue. I never felt taught or educated. Also not advised. It was just really sharing. And I remember exactly our very, very first encounter. It was a lunch just in between the two of us, arranged by Gérard Mortier in Salzburg in the mid-90s. And we didn't even talk about music. We talked about Jean-Luc Godard, about Patrice Chéreau, obviously about Francis Bacon and Paul Klee, and we talked about cuisine. And I remember also cooking my first ossobuco in my life together with Pierre and Hans in Baden-Baden. And there's so many memories of sharing. And when he played one of my pieces in Chicago, we were all being picked up at the airport. And the only car that was available through the car service was, I will never forget that, a pink stretch limousine. And that was not a joke, but it was obviously the only high category car available at this point. And I will never forget Pierre's smile when we all just sat down and was in a pink stretch limousine to go to the Symphony Center in Chicago. Endless memory. It's a long book of sensations and love and respect, and yeah, he's definitely with me and inside me every day. And in these times here, it's giving me courage to ideally move forward and not backwards. Beyond two, simply for the reason because there is a Beyond One, which is a piece for flute solo that I wrote some years ago for Emmanuel. And when Emmanuel and Maestro Barenboim called me and asked, like, Matthias, would you contribute a piece for this specific occasion right now? I had to think about how stunningly, amazingly, and beautifully Emmanuel has played my solo piece in the past. And I wanted to revisit some of the material in that piece. I wouldn't go as far to say it's a palimpsest, but there's some, let's say, gestures of the flute solo piece that have become the backbone of Beyond Two. But Beyond Two is not first only one flute, but it's a reference to the famous Debussy trio for flute, viola, and harp. It's a setting that I always wanted to compose and maybe never had the courage to, or the time, or all of that. And all of a sudden, this was like popping up, and I thought, wow, this is really my opportunity to finally live this dream and write for the Debussy trio setting. Knowing the interpreters, knowing the hall, knowing the acoustics, knowing Maestro Barenboim, and there's a lot of different layers and streams of energy coming together. The subtitle. Bridge over troubled water. I mean, I guess we all know where this is coming from. It's one of the most beautiful and richest songs from Paul Simon and Garfunkel. And in those really darkest times in late March and April, especially here in New York City, where I'm speaking to you from, it was a dark time. And that song that I listened to just hit me, and I was like emotionally completely destroyed. I have to say that. And it's a very beautiful song. And I just wanted to mention it as a reference, as a source of inspiration. There's nothing of that Paul Simon song or that material of that music that has been imported or referred to in my music. But I just love the image of what those words express so much, and has definitely determined the whole landscape of the trio, that darkness, but the continuation, and how a rest, a seamless standstill defines the next activity and how it's being regenerated. So it sets a tone, or it did for me. Maybe that's better to say. It set a tone. It defined the palette of the colors that I try to apply in that piece. But with looking back to that flute piece that I wrote for Emmanuel a long time ago. It's not only a beautiful halt, and it's not only that the Boulez Saal sounds so good and looks so good. There's much more to it, obviously. I mean, the vision of encountering and perceiving a sonic piece of art from different angles. So even having the opportunity sometimes to kind of to be able to change your listening position by yourself moving as a member of the audience, or the source of the sound being, turned or spinning. So it's really like, only, it's not about only listening perspective, but how you look at something. And it's so important nowadays to also see other audience members and how they respond to it, to see another face at opposite you. And in the middle of it, there is that prisma of expression and expressivity that is sharing in a beautiful way with everyone. And I was particularly conscious about the fact that all the musicians, 3 in my case, had to be socially distanced. And I've always admired that. I mean, I know that musicians like to be close together so they can really breathe together and phrase together and have this intimacy and directness. But it's equally possible if you're being further apart. And in my music, where I'm working so much with reverb, with the sustain, the resonance of a musical object, it's, I think, very fascinating to see how sound travels. So how like a pizzicato that's being released from an instrument, the viola in my case, how it kind of travels to the harp and is being responded, and then being, passed. It's like playing ping pong, an aerial ping pong of like all these implications and gestures are being floating through the air. Aerosol, but with notes. So this is definitely that triangle of let's call it an antiphony. It has been very much in my mind while conceiving the piece, and to know about the acoustics and how beautifully it's not only enhancing but supporting even most delicate sounds that travel. I mean, the music is very soft in some passages, and there's this one big fermata in the goldener Schnitt, in the golden ratio, perfect ratio of the piece, where we just endure silence as a moment of reflection, of where we, the listeners, are invited to have our own sensations and souvenirs circulate. It's like an open canvas that I haven't completely finished and filled, so it's over to you to include yourself with what you want to include and implement on that canvas that I'm providing, or that the musicians are providing. So this all works so beautifully in the Boulez Saal. And as you know, yes, I've performed many times, and the ensemble Intercontemporain has played many, many times in the hall. I enjoyed a wonderful collaboration with the Boulez ensemble. So this has all been part of this inner instrument that allowed me to write this piece. Of course, it will be played somewhere else eventually, but I can go as far as to say it has been specifically designed for those very specific and unique acoustics in the Boulez Saal. I think it's one of the absolute most stimulating and important key factors of how I generate music, and maybe even how I conduct, is to understand and allow the time, space that it needs to unfold. I think that we, especially conducting composers or composing conductors, sometimes have the tendency to be too fast. And that was one of the conversations that I had with Pierre Boulez when he was approaching his 80s, that he also noticed that even when conducting the scherzo by Mahler, he took it slightly slower, especially second Viennese school, with the extreme density of, let's say, the three orchestral pieces by Alban Berg. He took it slower and slower because he understood that the complexity of the sonic material needs space and time to really unfold and being made accessible to the listening capacity of our ears. This is definitely something I learned, and I learned to also embrace the fact that if you're conducting an orchestra in Amsterdam at the Concertgebouw or in Boston at Symphony Hall, you're dealing with very different acoustics. So why not taking that as an advantage and responding to it and taking that uniqueness of a specific acoustic and make that come alive, instead of just trying to force your concept or your interpretation, your style onto something and make it somehow work in different acoustics. I think it's beautiful to allow this to enter this process of bringing music alive and making it something unique. And it will be different from when you played in this hall, from when you played in a different hall like the next day. So space is very, very important. I also put less music on my paper. Well, this is like in progress right now, but not finished. But you don't have to fill every page with notes. Leave the unnecessary out, or try to. It's very hard, not only for the youngest of us, but also for mature and established composers. What can you leave out? Why do we always like squeeze things together, layer after layer after layer? Sometimes it's when you rehearse an orchestra and you just rehearse, let's say, some bongos that are playing together with the double basses for a pizzicato. You just rehearse that. Maybe you add the harps because they have to understand that they're forming a unit, and everyone else is being hushed just to explain something as a conductor. And then you think, wow, just the bongos and the pizzicatos and the basses and the harp playing a harmonic at the same time sounds fantastic. Why are 70 other people playing at the same time? This is also recognizing space and what it is. It's our oxygen. Space is our medium. It allows the time that we are measuring for you with sonic events to unfold and create a landscape. So I'm very conscious about it, and maybe even with more experience, it has become increasingly determining for my whole imaginative system that this is. It's very complex. It was a blessing, and I will talk about it in a second, and it was devastating. And all of that together, it was a daily roller coaster of emotions, of, especially in the beginnings when we had no idea how bad it would be. And then, in March, and then definitely in April, all these cancellations started to happen. Everything was folding. Every institution was shutting down. Lots of things were completely lost. Institutions shutting down, going bankrupt, and. And at the same time, you're sitting at home and you finally have what you always wanted: more time at home with your loved ones, and have time to, in my case, not only to compose, but to teach more, to actually have time to commit to what we're doing. And even more importantly, to think about what we're doing instead of just doing it all the time. To really recharge the system maybe even reset the system to recognize the privilege of what we're able to do, even with the restrictions. Recognizing all the new possibilities with maybe even a Zoom interview and giving online concerts, virtual concerts with or without public or limited public. These are all new parameters that we're trying to understand and to absorb, to translate it into something different. And most importantly, and I can speak for myself, but maybe also for others, to recognize the tremendous privilege what it means to share music live. I'm absolutely sure that after this, when we come out of it, that there will be a new appreciation of a public going to the theater, going to the ballet, going to the symphony, going to a concert, to really make a choice and appreciate and understand what it means to bring a Mahler Third Symphony at the Concertgebouw in a fantastic hall together and put it on stage and play at that level that we're able to perform at nowadays. And looking back at hundreds of years of traditions of evolving instrument building, like there is so much that comes together nowadays to allow something of that extraordinary quality to happen. And I really believe that the appreciation of witnessing the moment of something extraordinary will be much enhanced, and there will be a new wave of excitement and sharing when we can finally sit down and, from our perspective, to play for an audience, but also for an audience to really feel music live again. It has been said many, many times, but it is so true. And every day we have, communications with our colleagues and presenters and musicians, and we're all so desperately craving not to be on a screen, but to be back in a real world and life. So whenever we get to that light at the end of the tunnel, it will be a tremendous, not only relief, but a tremendous rebirth and recognizing the privilege of what we can do, and that we have the voice to share ideas and emotions with a large public, ideally. I mean, I think it's wonderful to understand that these initiatives are not a compromise, but a real creation. That's really important, and to really produce it at the highest level. I wouldn't say that it is not like equally important for all of us, having made those videos where you play your bassoon in your kitchen and you multiply yourself to play all the voices. And it's wonderful, it's emotional, and we need it. It's an instrument that helps us to heal, but we need to also cover the other end and set the bar very high for the professional quality of what we're trying to convey to an audience. So it's all new, but it really moves me to see how really well done and professionally and emotionally well done it is what we what you do in Berlin at the Boulez Saal. It's key to the dialogue. I'm avoiding to say key to success. In these times, there is no more strategy of how to be successful. All standards are gone, and there's also no more status. So we're all in the same boat. There's no pointing at anyone, and clearly no looking back at the nostalgia that we always had. Oh, it was so beautiful before. Oh, it was so easy. Look at what we did, and now we can't. This is not helpful. We need to basically start over, throw everything overboard to live lighter, with less baggage. Like, going back to the beginning of our talk, like as I tried to describe Pierre Boulez, we need to move. But if we just put all that nostalgic weight on our shoulders, we're just going to be moving very slowly or not at all. So take a deep breath, cut off everything that's not needed and unnecessary, and move on. That's what we do. And an initiative like these beautiful 10 creations world premieres is definitely a major part of giving us courage. So it's like sharing gifts for the musicians, gifts for public, but most importantly, gifts for ourselves.